I'm dropping out tomorrow. We just don't have the money anymore.
No, baby, your dream ain't ending because our pockets got a little empty.
I'm dropping out tomorrow. We just don't have the money anymore.
No, baby, your dream ain't ending because our pockets got a little empty.
Nobody knew what Grandma meant that evening. Not her grandson, not the neighbors, not even the pastor who had known her for more than 40 years. Because inside that tiny velvet jewelry box was the only valuable thing she still owned, her wedding ring. The ring her late husband had placed on her finger 50 years earlier. She had promised herself she would never take it off, never sell it, never let it leave the family. But love has a way of changing promises, especially when the person you love is about to give up on the dream you've prayed for every single day. Grandma looked across the room as her grandson quietly closed his bedroom door. She could hear him trying not to cry. That sound broke her heart more than any bill she couldn't pay. She slowly opened the old jewelry box. Inside rested the gold ring that had been with her through every season of life, through joy, hardship, celebrations, and loss. She gently touched it and whispered with a trembling smile, "Your grandpa would have wanted this." She closed the box, slipped it into her purse, and quietly made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Grandma woke up before the sun. She moved quietly through the little house, careful not to wake her grandson. For a moment, she stood outside his bedroom door. She smiled. Even while he slept, he still looked like the little boy who used to run into her arms after school. Back then, life was simple. A scraped knee could be fixed with a bandage. A broken toy could be replaced. But now, he was carrying worries no 21-year-old should have to carry. Grandma walked into the kitchen and started making pancakes. The smell filled the house. A few minutes later, her grandson walked in, rubbing his eyes. He forced a smile. "Morning, Grandma." She smiled back as if nothing was wrong. "Sit down, baby. Breakfast is ready." They ate together in silence. Neither of them wanted to bring up college again. Finally, Grandma reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "Promise me one thing." He looked up. "What is it?" "No matter what happens today, don't make any decisions you'll regret tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "I promise." After breakfast, he grabbed his backpack. "I've got one last meeting with the financial aid office." Grandma stood and hugged him tightly, longer than usual. "So do your best." "I will." As soon as the front door closed, Grandma looked at the family picture hanging on the wall. It showed her late husband, and their grandson, as a little boy sitting on Grandpa's shoulders. She smiled through tears. "You always said education was something nobody could ever steal from him," she whispered. Then she picked up her purse. Inside was the little velvet jewelry box. She drove across town to the old pawn shop. The owner recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Johnson," he said kindly. "It's been years." Grandma smiled politely. "It has." He noticed the jewelry box in her hands. His expression changed. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Grandma slowly opened the box. The gold wedding ring sparkled under the lights. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I've seen that ring on your hand for as long as I've known you," the owner said softly. Grandma looked at it one last time. "My husband gave it to me on the happiest day of my life." She paused. "And today, it's going to help someone else have one of theirs." The owner lowered his head. "I know this isn't easy." "It isn't," Grandma replied. "But watching my grandson give up on his dream would hurt even more." The owner carefully examined the ring. "It's worth more than you think." Grandma smiled gently. "It was never about the money." He looked confused. She continued. "It's about keeping a promise. My husband made me promise that no matter what happened after he was gone, we'd make sure our grandson finished college." She took a deep breath. "I intend to keep that promise." The owner quietly nodded. Without another word, he offered her a fair price. Grandma accepted. As she signed the receipt, she looked down at the empty space on her finger. For the first time in 50 years, the ring was gone. She took one deep breath, wiped away a tear, and walked out of the shop with enough money to pay the tuition balance. Outside, the morning sun warmed her face. She looked toward the sky and whispered, "We did it, sweetheart." Then she headed straight to the college. What Grandma didn't know was that someone had seen her walk into the pawn shop. And before the day was over, her grandson would discover a sacrifice she never wanted him to know about. Grandma drove straight to the college with the tuition money safely tucked inside her purse. Every mile felt heavier than the last, but her heart was peaceful. She wasn't thinking about the ring anymore. She was thinking about her grandson's future. When she reached the financial aid office, she quietly walked to the counter. "I'd like to make a tuition payment for my grandson," she said with a warm smile. The employee processed the payment and handed her a receipt. "He's all set for this semester." Grandma closed her eyes for a brief moment and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." She folded the receipt and slipped it into her purse before quietly leaving the building. Across campus, her grandson was sitting outside, staring at the email that said his tuition deadline expired that afternoon. He sighed. "I guess this is really the end." Just then, his phone rang. "Hello? Good afternoon. This is the financial aid office. We're calling to let you know your tuition has been paid in full." He sat upright. "What? There has to be some mistake." "No, sir. Your balance has been completely cleared." He froze. "Who paid it?" "I'm sorry. We can't share that information." The call ended. He couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He rushed to the financial aid office. "Can somebody please tell me who paid my tuition?" The employee smiled politely. "I can't tell you who made the payment." She paused. "But I can tell you this. They love you very much." Those words stayed with him. Someone had sacrificed a great deal. But who? Confused, he left campus and started driving home. Halfway there, he remembered something. Grandma had said she needed to run a few errands that morning. She had looked nervous. She had hugged him longer than usual. Something didn't feel right. Instead of going home, he turned the car around and drove back toward downtown. He stopped at the grocery store. Nothing. He checked the pharmacy. Nothing. Then, as he drove past an old pawn shop, he noticed the owner standing outside, locking the front door for lunch. The owner looked familiar. Grandma had known him for years. On impulse, he pulled over. "Excuse me, sir." The owner smiled. "Can I help you?" "My grandmother came here this morning." The owner's smile faded. "I'm not sure I should discuss my customers." The young man nodded. "I understand." He started to walk away. Then he quietly added, "She somehow paid my college tuition today. I just want to know if she's okay." The owner looked down at the ground. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "Your grandmother told me you'd never find out." The young man's heart started racing. What did she do? The owner slowly walked back inside the shop. He returned carrying a small, empty velvet jewelry box. The grandson recognized it instantly. It always sat on Grandma's dresser. His voice trembled. Where's her ring?" The owner looked him in the eyes. "She sold it." Silence. The young man couldn't speak. "That was her wedding ring." The owner continued softly. "She told me your grandfather gave it to her 50 years ago. She said she'd rather lose the ring than watch you lose your dream." Tears filled the grandson's eyes. He could barely breathe. He looked down at the empty jewelry box in his hands. For the first time in his life, he realized just how much love could cost. Without saying another word, he thanked the owner, climbed into his car, and drove home with tears streaming down his face. He wasn't thinking about college anymore. He was thinking about Grandma and the promise she had quietly kept. The drive home felt longer than ever before. The grandson gripped the steering wheel as tears rolled down his face. Every memory of his grandmother came rushing back. He remembered the nights she stayed awake, waiting for him to finish studying. He remembered the mornings she packed his lunch before he even got out of bed. He remembered every birthday, every graduation, every encouraging word she had ever spoken. And now he knew the truth. She had given up the one thing she treasured most, just to protect his future. When he pulled into the driveway, He noticed Grandma sitting on the front porch in her old rocking chair. She smiled the moment she saw his car. "There you are, baby," she said. "I was wondering when you'd be home." He stepped out of the car, but couldn't speak. Grandma immediately noticed the tears in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Instead of answering, he slowly walked toward her. Then he knelt beside her chair. Without saying a word, he gently took her left hand into his own. His eyes searched for the wedding ring that had been there his entire life. It was gone. Grandma quietly pulled her hand back and smiled. "You weren't supposed to find out." His voice trembled. "Why, Grandma?" She looked at him with the same loving eyes that had comforted him since he was a little boy. "Because I never wanted you carrying the weight of my sacrifice." He shook his head. "That ring was Grandpa's." She smiled gently. "No." He looked confused. "It was never the ring that mattered." She looked toward the evening sky. "It was the promise behind it." She paused, before continuing. "The day your grandfather placed that ring on my finger, he told me something I'll never forget. If we're ever blessed with grandchildren, let's make sure they have opportunities we never had." A tear rolled down her cheek. "When he passed away, I promised him I'd never stop believing in you." The grandson lowered his head and began to cry. "I'm so sorry." Grandma reached forward and gently lifted his chin. "Don't apologize. I didn't lose anything today. I invested in someone I love." She smiled through her tears. "And I know your grandfather would be smiling too." The grandson wrapped his arms around her and held her tighter than he ever had before. Neither of them spoke. They simply sat together on the porch as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the trees. After several quiet moments, the grandson finally whispered, "I'll graduate, Grandma. I'll make every sacrifice worth it." Grandma smiled. "I already know you will." For the first time in many months, they both felt something stronger than fear. They felt hope. But neither of them realized that an unexpected visitor would arrive the very next morning, carrying news that would change their lives forever. The next morning, the grandson woke up before Grandma for the first time in years. He quietly made breakfast, brewed her favorite coffee, and placed everything on the kitchen table before she came downstairs. Grandma stopped in the doorway and smiled. "Well, look at you," she said softly. "I could get used to this." He smiled back, but his eyes were still heavy from everything he had learned the day before. After breakfast, he reached into his backpack and carefully placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Grandma adjusted her glasses. "What is this?" "My class schedule," he replied. "I'm going back today." Tears filled Grandma's eyes. "I knew you would." He gently took both of her hands. "No, Grandma, I almost gave up. You didn't." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "From this day forward, I promise you something." "What is it, baby?" "I'll study harder than I've ever studied before. I'll graduate. I'll build a life Grandpa would be proud of. And one day, I'll buy back that wedding ring." Grandma smiled warmly and shook her head. "You don't owe me a ring." "I know," he said. "But every time I think about your sacrifice, I want to honor it." A few years passed. The little house looked exactly the same, but life inside it had changed. The grandson graduated at the top of his class. When his name was called, he looked into the crowd. There was Grandma, standing and clapping with tears streaming down her face. She wasn't cheering because he had earned a diploma. She was cheering because a promise had been fulfilled. Several months later, after starting his first full-time job, the grandson drove to the same pawn shop. The owner looked up and immediately recognized him. "I've been wondering when you'd come back." The young man smiled. "I'm here for something that belongs to my family." The owner reached beneath the counter and carefully placed the small velvet jewelry box on the glass display. "I kept hoping this day would come." With trembling hands, the grandson opened the box. Inside was Grandpa's wedding ring. He thanked the owner paid for the ring, and drove straight home. Grandma was sitting in her rocking chair on the front porch. He knelt beside her, opened the jewelry box, and held out the ring. She covered her mouth with both hands. "I thought I'd never see it again," she whispered. He gently slid the ring back onto her finger. "It never stopped belonging to you." Grandma looked at the ring, then at her grandson. "No," she said with a smile. "It belongs to this family's story." Years later, whenever people asked the grandson what inspired him to succeed, he never talked about awards, degrees, or money. He simply smiled and said, "The greatest investment anyone ever made in me wasn't a bank loan or a scholarship. It was my grandmother's love." Because true wealth isn't measured by what we keep. It's measured by what we're willing to give, so that someone we love can have a brighter tomorrow.